What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and with WWDC 2020 and the iOS 14 beta right around the corner, I wanted to make a video discussing the final leaks and rumors about the software. We're going to talk about what we can expect, what you should not get your hopes up for, and a possible renaming of the software. So yes, we should be seeing the first beta of iOS 14 on Monday, June 22nd, around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and of course I will be live streaming during the event here on YouTube. But let's just discuss this first. What if iOS 14 isn't even called iOS 14 after all? So as you guys probably remember, last year Apple renamed the iPad version of its software to iPadOS 13. So it seems like the same thing might actually happen this year with the iPhone software. So instead of iOS 14, it looks like it might actually be called iPhoneOS 14. And this is according to John Prosser, who simply tweeted out iPhoneOS earlier today. And this honestly would not be too surprising if you think about it. I mean, we have iPadOS, watchOS, tvOS, macOS, and the only thing missing would of course be iPhoneOS. So it would give some uniformity to Apple's operating systems, and I feel like this could actually be better for Apple focusing on individual software instead of just having like iOS and iPadOS, which could be why we saw, buggy releases in the past, because it was trying to do everything, in one iOS. Whereas now it could be, focusing solely on iPhoneOS and focusing solely on iPadOS as two separate, operating systems. So that's just my thinking for the time being. But of course, this does raise the question, what about the iPod Touch? Will there be an iPod Touch OS? I doubt it. I don't think that's going to happen. It's either going to run iPhoneOS, or we could have just seen the last of the iPod Touch last year with the 7th generation model. We're going to have to wait and see on that. But I would assume that if Apple keeps the iPod Touch around, it's just going to run iPhoneOS. So not really too big of a deal there. I don't really think anybody running iPod Touch is going to care about their software version being named iPhoneOS. Now, even if it does get renamed to iPhoneOS, which by the way, that was the original name back in the day, 2007 to 2010, iOS 4 was the introduction of the iOS name instead of iPhoneOS. But even if it does get renamed back to iPhoneOS, I'm sure a lot of us will still be saying iOS for a good while now. And plus, that'll cover both iPhoneOS and iPadOS in one short acronym. So I'll likely continue saying iOS on the channel from time to time, and maybe all the time, I don't know. So if I'm saying iOS, of course I do mean iPhoneOS throughout this video, but we'll have to wait and see what Apple actually announces at WWDC on Monday. So anyways, moving on to more about the software itself, what should we expect from Apple this year? And as I've reported in multiple videos, performance and stability will be at the forefront of this update. It's going to be the main focus of iOS 14 or iPhoneOS and iPadOS 14. Now that's not to say that we will not get new features, but I would temper expectations a little bit, because reportedly some of the features originally slated for iOS 14 have been pushed back to iOS 15. And that was actually mentioned in the first ever big report on iOS 14, which came from Mark Gurman back in November 2019. And in that report on Bloomberg, they said, quote, Apple has also considered delaying some iOS 14 features until 2021 in an update called Azul Plus 1 internally that will likely become known as iOS 15 externally to give the company more time to focus on performance. And again, that was back in November 2019, so long before the pandemic and everything going on in the world, Apple was already considering delaying those features until next year. And then of course, later on in 2020, we started seeing tons of iOS 14 leaks, mainly from 9to5Mac, who got their hands on the code of an early build of iOS 14. We saw leaked features like iMessage getting the ability to edit messages after they've been sent, a redesigned home screen with a list view. We saw widgets, a redesigned wallpaper section and settings, a new pre-installed AR application, and much, much more. There were tons of leaks. I made multiple videos on this here as well. So if you want to see all the leaks that have been released for iOS 14, go back and watch those videos. I will have all of them linked down in the description below, and also up in the cards up in the top right of this video. Now, one major thing that we've learned since all of these leaks is that the whole talk of widgets being on the home screen might not be happening at all, at least not this year. So there's been a lot of back and forth between leakers about whether or not these will be on the home screen or just in the control center or in the widget section itself here. Because if you look at the widgets, it actually looks like it's in the control center. So we could see something in the control center here, but the likelihood of it being on the home screen seems to be kind of diminished now. That doesn't really seem to be what's going to happen with iOS 14. We really haven't seen anything concrete except for the image of what looks like the widgets in a control center style page. So what I think is that if we do get widgets in iOS 14 or iPhoneOS 14, it's probably going to be within the control center. That's my guess. I don't think we're going to actually see widgets on the home screen, but again, there's really nothing concrete just yet, so I would temper your expectations for anything related to widgets. There was also a report about phone call recording coming to iOS 14 because of a leaked screenshot from iOS 14, but that was quickly dismissed by leaker Fudge over on Twitter, who said that it's simply a feature only available for debugging in internal builds of iOS. So no, do not expect a built-in phone call recording feature. However, something that should be coming in iOS 14 and what was just reported on today by 9to5Mac is a nice update coming to the podcasts application. So with iOS 14, we'll be seeing an Apple Music-like experience with a For You tab at the bottom to show you podcasts that you might like based on what you currently subscribe to and what you currently listen to. So looks like an overhaul, just overall of the podcast app. It also looks like we'll get the option to see bonus content. They say that it's, quote, similar to what you get when you buy a movie in the Apple TV app. These bonus contents will be presented in the same feed as the podcast, but separate from regular episodes. Another feature we'll likely see in iOS 14 and iPadOS 14 is real-time translation for web pages in Safari. So this also comes from 9to5Mac, of course, who says, quote, Siri on iOS can already translate words and phrases, and Apple might now expand this translation feature throughout the system. 9to5Mac has found that Safari will have a built-in translator allowing users to translate web pages without any third-party app or service. The translation feature is likely to be available as an individual option for each website, but users will also be able to use automatic translations as well. There's also the possibility to switch between the original and translated text without reloading the page. So that'll be another useful feature that we can look forward to in this next version of iOS or iPhoneOS. Now, another feature that I'm really looking forward to, and I think is going to be included with iOS 14, is allowing third-party default applications. So letting us set third-party apps as the default mail. So instead of like the regular mail app, you can use something else like Outlook or maybe even Spark, something like that. You could do it for the browser and the music apps as well. So if you didn't like Safari and you wanted to use Chrome, you should be able to do that with iOS 14. Same with the music app as well. Maybe if you wanted Spotify as your default music app, you could do that. And of course, I think that's going to be big for a lot of people because of course, a lot of people have already been, with Spotify for so long before Apple Music was a thing. And of course, you're going to have the same thing with browsers and mail and things like that. And speaking of mail, I think a lot of people are going to switch their default mail app over to something else unless we see some major improvements to mail in iOS 14, which we very well could because that was probably the biggest mess in iOS 13 was the mail app. So we should see a lot of improvements to that, but still, I think a lot of people are just going to switch right away just because of the bad experience that we had this year with the mail app. And then we should also see the standalone fitness and AR apps that Apple has been working on for a while now. So the fitness app will allow you to download a lot of workout plans and things like that for offline usage. And of course, the AR app, Apple's been working on augmented reality and a standalone app for a good while. So we should see that as well, which I talked about in previous videos. So overall, I think we're going to see a lot of new UI changes in this update and a lot of changes to the built-in applications like the podcast, like the messages right here with iMessage. I think we're going to get some changes to the mail application and Safari and, health, things like that. We're going to see some new features outside of those new applications, of course, but I just don't think that we're going to get a very feature-heavy release like we saw with iOS 13, and I don't think we're going to get every single feature that we saw leaked in the iOS 14 code. So every feature that was leaked, I don't think we're going to see that. Of course, some of those are going to be delayed until iOS 15 at least. So again, just temper your expectations. It's a lot better to be, not surprised than to just be disappointed because you're expecting so many things. So just go into it with low expectations. That way you can be, happier if it's better than your expectations instead of just being let down by the software. And again, a big reason that we probably won't see as many features as we originally thought is because number one, of course, the pandemic, and number two, Apple wants stability over everything. So if the betas go well, we could see more and more features added, but I would, lower your expectations for the early betas at least, because once again, don't forget, Apple is definitely holding back on some features for 2021 and iOS 15. We're just gonna have to wait and see how this new system that Apple has in place for iPhoneOS works here with iOS 14. I'm talking about the system that Bloomberg originally reported on to make sure it's not as buggy as iOS 13. Now, as for iPadOS 14, watchOS 7, and all the new hardware rumors, I will be talking about those in tomorrow's video, which will be all about WWDC 2020 and what to expect from that. But of course, I'm curious about your guys' opinion. Do you like the naming scheme of iOS 14 or iPadOS 14? Which one do you like better? I personally, of course, I'm used to saying iOS 14, and I probably like iOS 14 better, but I don't hate iPhoneOS 14. So just let me know which one you guys like better down in the comment section below. I'm really curious to see which one you like better and which one you hope that we get come Monday. And also let me know what features you're looking forward to most in iOS 14, which ones you think we're going to get, which ones you think we're not going to get. Let me know all your thoughts, of course, down there in those comments below. And again, stay tuned because I will be live streaming WWDC 2020 and giving my live reaction and, talking about iOS 14, everything on that stream. So definitely make sure you keep it locked to the channel come Monday. I will probably start streaming around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So stay tuned for that. I will be posting it over on Twitter and things like that as well. So if you're following me over there, you will know when I go live. But anyways, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss more content. Of course, a lot of iOS 14 or iPhoneOS 14 videos. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.